Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this edition of Six Semper Tyrannis News and We're Hit Television. I'm Mark Matheny. And of course, if you haven't heard already, which I'm sure most of you have heard, Derek Chauvin has been found guilty on all counts, 3. Second-degree felony murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. I'm going to show you the clip of the actual hearing where he was sentenced. This was from NBC News.
I hate to interrupt. My apologies to the councilman. The court is back in session. You're looking at Derek Chauvin. They're standing as the jury now is led into the courthouse. Of course, we have not, and we will not see the jury, but all the participants and spectators are standing right now as they take their seats.
Members of the jury, I understand you have a verdict. Members of the jury, I will now read the verdicts as they will appear in the permanent records of the 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota, County of Hennepin, District Court, 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota Plaintiff versus Derek Michael Chauvin, Defendant. Verdict, Count 1. Court File Number 27, CR 20-12646. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to Count 1, unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:44 p.m. Signed, juror foreperson, juror number 19. Same caption, verdict count 2. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 2, third-degree murder, perpetrating an eminently dangerous act, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Signed by jury foreperson, juror number 19. Same caption, verdict count 3. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 3, second-degree manslaughter, culpable negligence, creating an unreasonable risk, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Jury foreperson 019. Members of the jury, I'm now going to ask you individually if these are your true and correct verdicts. Please respond yes or no. Juror number 2, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 9, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 19, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 27, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 44, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 52, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 55, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 79, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
And so on. So I'm going to stop that. I was having a buffering issue, but nevertheless, he has been found guilty. Derek Chauvin guilty on all counts. And one thing about it is, people, you had Maxine Waters, obviously, the other day.
Juror number 85, are these your true and correct verdicts?
I apologize. But you had Maxine Waters just a couple days ago come out, and basically a lot of people have condemned what she said, but she basically came out and you could take it as if she was trying to intimidate the jurors or something when she came out and basically said that there needs to be a guilty verdict, basically. Otherwise, we're going to have to get confrontational. Basically, she said that we're going to have to stay out on the street, which a lot of, congressmen took that as incitement, especially from the GOP side. On of course, the Democrat side, not so much. But I do want to show you Maxine Waters, this was from a couple years ago. This is the first time where she basically did the same thing under Trump's administration when they were trying to impeach President Trump. And this is a clip that she was out at a rally with Democrat supporters, and here's what she had to say back then.
If we can't protect the children, we can't protect anybody. If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome. The people are going to turn on them. They're going to protest. They're going to absolutely harass them until they decide that they're going to tell the president, no, I can't hang with you.
Not in D.C. Not in the U.S. Not in D.C. Not in the U.S. Not in D.C. Not in the U.S.
Our issue is strong borders, no crime. Their issue is open borders. Let MS-13 all over our country. That's what's going to happen if you listen to them.
And that's basically what has happened, people. I mean, that's exactly what we're seeing. But nevertheless, I'm not on the border issue. But Trump was right about that. It's exactly what we're seeing. So you have this guilty verdict. They found, him guilty in the death of George Floyd after this trial. And there was an article from the New American that covered it, basically saying that it was a show trial that would make Joseph Stalin blush. The jury convicted Chauvin of second-degree felony murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. And according to the article, it says that although Floyd's autopsy clearly did show that he overdosed on fentanyl and suffered a major cardiovascular problem, which means basically he contributed to his own death. Despite the fact that Chauvin did restrain him on May 25th, they've had this guilty verdict, and Judge Peter Cahill refused to declare a mistrial after possible jury tampering, not only by Representative Maxine Waters, but also today, President Joe Biden's attempt to influence the outcome. Biden said he prayed the jury would reach the right verdict. And I was listening to the news today on the radio, on 610 radio, and they said even though this judge asked all these congressmen and women and everyone to refrain from speaking on this trial, nevertheless, they did anyway. They still did. So he has been found guilty, nevertheless. So, goodness gracious, I'm getting a problem here, guys. Hold on with me. Bear with me 1 second. I'm having an internet problem. So I was trying to show you an article, but nevertheless, there are some saying and contending that there could be some interference with this, this verdict because of the fact that Maxine Waters came out and was basically saying there better be a guilty verdict or we're going to remain on the streets, we're going to get confrontational. And nevertheless, and then you have Joe Biden coming out and doing the same thing. What's going on with my computer here, guys? Bear with me. But so, like I said, he was found guilty. The jury found Chauvin guilty of the following crimes: unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, the third-degree murder, perpetrating an eminently dangerous act, and then also second-degree manslaughter, culpable negligence, creating an unreasonable risk. And I'm not going to lie, when I saw the original videos and things of it, in my opinion, I felt like when George Floyd was saying, hey, I can't breathe, I felt that they should have been trying to alleviate a little bit, but he wanted them, if you go back and watch the video, he did ask them to lay him on the ground. First, they said they were going to put him in the vehicle and roll the windows down. He didn't want that, and he kept saying he wasn't able to breathe. He started to say he couldn't breathe before they put him on the ground, by the way. So just read that. Now, I'm not taking sides. I'm just trying to go through all the facts and show you. But the jury reached that verdict despite the fact that there was evidence that Floyd overdosed on these fentanyl and other drugs and suffered a cardiovascular problem, a heart attack or whatever it was. And the county coroner told a prosecutor that Floyd had taken a fatal dose of fentanyl, an opiate at least 50 times more powerful than morphine. And the autopsy said that Chauvin, who had pinned Floyd to the ground because he resisted arrest, inflicted no life-threatening injuries. And I did see that some are coming out saying that there was video showing that Chauvin's knee was not so much on his neck as it was in the middle of his back, trying to hold him down. And the autopsy also did find that Floyd suffered severe coronary artery disease, high blood pressure, and hypertensive heart disease at the time. So again, guys, I'm not taking a side here. I'm just going to give you the facts, let you decide on what you feel is right or wrong. But that is the case. And now Chauvin might overturn the verdicts on appeal, given the fact that Maxine Waters came out and Joe Biden came out today too. They may feel like this had tainted the jury or pressured the jury. And here is the video where Maxine Waters comes out and she's basically making statements that they feel it may have tainted the jurors and witnesses.
So, yes, I would like to see the bill in Congress pass on police reform, but I know that the right wing, the racists, are opposed to it, and I don't know what's going to happen to it. But I know this, we've got to stay in the street.
And you notice that she ties right wing, and right after that she says the right wing, the racist. So again, her narrative is that everybody who is a conservative is, a racist, basically. I don't know what's going on there. I'm not trying to share anything. So let's get back to the video.
And we've got to demand justice.
As a black man, despite all of the efforts, I feel like nothing changes. And George Floyd is waking so many people up, yet nothing has happened despite the rhetoric. Like what needs to happen that's different this year than all the years before?
We're looking for a guilty verdict. We're looking for a guilty verdict, and we're looking to see if all of the talk that took place and has been taking place after they saw what happened to George Floyd, if nothing does not happen, then we know that we've got to not only stay in the street, but we've got to fight for justice. But I am very hopeful, and I hope that we're going to get a verdict that will say guilty, guilty, guilty. And if we don't, we cannot go away.
And not just manslaughter, right? I mean...
Oh, no, not manslaughter. No. This is guilty. For murder. I don't know whether it's in the first degree, but as far as I'm concerned, it's first degree murder.
Congresswoman, what happens if we do not get what you just told? What should the people do? What should protesters on the street do?
I didn't hear you.
What happens?
What should protesters do?
Listen.
Well, we got to stay on the street, and we've got to get more active. We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure that they know that we mean business.
What do you think about this curfew tonight?
So there again, she said, we've got to make sure that they understand if we don't get a guilty verdict, we're going to stay out here and we are going to get more confrontational and we're going to show them that we mean business. So imagine if you're a juror, and you hear this. Now, the judge is saying, well, they're not watching the news, this, and that, and the other. I'm sure these people know what's happening, and I'm sure they heard this stuff, and I'm sure they felt the pressure of having to make this decision. And I'm not the jury, and I'm not the judge, so I'm not making a decision either way. The decision's been made in the court. And just like with O.J. Simpson, when O.J. Simpson was tried and found not guilty, and people ask me, I said, I wasn't there. I don't know what happened. Whatever the court said, that's what courts are for. So I accept that verdict. And I accept this verdict. So, but there are some questions that remain. Waters, came out there, Maxine, and said that. And then Joe Biden seemed to also try to sway the jury as well, explaining that he had spoken to Floyd's family, and Biden said he hoped for a conviction. He said, I'm praying the verdict is the right one, Biden said. I wouldn't say that unless the jury was sequestered now. And so again, this, could be construed as pressure. There was a Washington Post article that noted that there was a lawyer named Bradley Moss said no sitting president should be publicly weighing in on how a jury should rule in a pending criminal matter. No president, no liberal or conservative, Democrat or Republican. And this is what Bradley Moss said, an attorney. So, and it goes on and on. It talks about it. But I want to show you, now you have Antifa and BLM. They came out with flyers in Portland just before this jury, made the decision. But they came out with these flyers that basically said on the flyer, no matter what the verdict is, we go hard for George Floyd, Chapman Square, 3 p.m., Woodlawn Park, 8 p.m., no streamers, no peace police, no just rage. So, and it was basically promoted by Antifa-affiliated groups on Twitter, and, Twitter didn't block it, obviously, but they were instructing protesters in Portland, Oregon to rage for George Floyd no matter what the verdict is, basically. Here is a picture of the flyer. No matter what the verdict is, we go hard for George Floyd, and so on. So this is what they were pushing. And, that's essentially what Maxine Waters and them were saying as well. And the poster basically warns rioters to have National Lawyers Guild phone numbers on hand in case they get arrested, and to stay with a buddy. They want you to stay with a buddy. It says you've got the right to protest. The right doesn't have a right to protest anymore because we're labeled as terrorists, but the left still has a right to protest, according to this. The sign indicating, it says you have the right to protest, one of the signs say, and indicating those caught committing criminal acts could attempt to use the First Amendment freedom of assembly as a defense, and so on. So there's still riots going on. We've been seeing riots all over Portland. They've attacked police stations. They've attacked a sheriff's station. And here is, let me see here. This is a brief video clip just minutes before the verdict took place in the hearing. I'll play that here. See all these people ready.
George Floyd! George Floyd! George Floyd! George Floyd! Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter!
And that was just minutes before the actual verdict. Now I want to show you another article that I thought was interesting. And this is up at InfoWars. Democrats and BLM are unsatisfied with Chauvin guilty verdict. Justice will never be served. Democrats and the Black Lives Matter minions have gotten the verdict they wanted in the trial of Derek Chauvin on Tuesday, but many appear to still be dissatisfied. Democrat politicians like Vice President Kamala Harris, Governor Gavin Newsom, and Senator Bernie Sanders quickly put out talking points that a guilty verdict for Chauvin doesn't mean that justice was served. And so here's what Harris said. Let's say there is a guilty verdict on the highest charge. It will not take away the pain of George Floyd's family, Harris said. Shortly after the verdict was announced on Tuesday afternoon, it will not take away the pain of the communities, all communities, regardless of the color or geographic location, that felt sadness and anger in what they witnessed at the video. Well, I mean, obviously, it's not going to take away the pain. We know that. I'm not saying, I felt bad for George Floyd. I felt bad because it was an unfortunate thing that happened. I felt like, in my humble opinion, that the police, once he was saying he couldn't breathe and he appeared to be having problems, that they should have directed an ambulatory, help and tried to help him in some way. Nevertheless, Chauvin put his knee on the back of this guy and waited, and George died. Gavin Newsom came out and said George Floyd would still be alive if he looked like me. That must change. I doubt that. That's not necessarily the case. Remember, there was another guy named Tim. I can't remember the other guy's name, and I should have pulled it up. But there was another gentleman, a white gentleman, that went viral, basically, where the police stopped this white gentleman. The white gentleman had called the police, and it was all white cops that showed up. And he was saying I think he was not on his medication or something, and he was feeling suicidal or something. They came to try to help him. They got him on the ground. They did the same thing. They put the knee on the neck. The man kept saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. He stopped moving, and they started joking about it and making fun of him and so on. When the paramedics got there, the paramedics came up and said, the man is dead. And then the cops freaked out because after that, they knew they were in trouble. But they did the same exact thing. And there was no, it wasn't really, it didn't go mainstream news. It didn't really get talked about or anything. And I'm not saying that to try to offset this. I'm just saying, people, here Gavin Newsom says George Floyd would still be alive if he looked like me. That's not necessarily the case. Let's not go into that. Let's look at police brutality in general, and let's stop looking at always this race thing when it's not necessarily always racially invoked. That's the problem. He says no conviction can repair the harm done to the Floyd family, but today's verdict provides accountability. Now we must continue our work to root out racial injustice that haunts our society. And Gavin Newsom, of all people, I think they're trying to run him out of office anyway because of the handling of the coronavirus epidemic with his lockdowns and his hypocrisy. So he ain't really one to listen to. Bernie Sanders, a guy comes out. He says the jury's verdict delivers accountability for Derek Chauvin, but not justice for George Floyd. Real justice for him and too many others can only happen when we build a nation that fundamentally respects the human dignity of every person. Now, I'll say this, Bernie Sanders's his quote is not so bad. I mean, yes, I think that in the police departments, they need to keep looking at that. But I'm going to talk a little bit about that too. And then you had Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who came out, and here was her response, and she did a video response. Let me see if I can set that up for you. This was her response. It's a quick response, so it's going to be fast. But here was Ocasio-Cortez's response.
This not feeling like justice. And I want to just let you all know and create the affirmation that that this isn't justice.
What the hell is it then?
It's not justice.
Okay. So it's not justice because Ocasio-Cortez probably wanted him hung in the street and beaten and tarred and feathered. But that's what we have the courts for, people, and the court delivered the justice. Okay. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, obviously, who, in my opinion, is another race baiter, denied the justice was served as well. Here is Keith Ellis talking. It's a quick speech too, but I'll give you what he had to say as well.
I became the lead prosecutor for the case. I asked for time and patience to review the facts, gather evidence, and prosecute for the murder of George Floyd to the fullest extent the law allowed. I want to thank the community for giving us that time and allowing us to do our work. That long, hard, painstaking work has culminated today. I would not call today's verdict justice, however, because justice implies true restoration. But it is accountability, which is the first step towards justice. And now the cause of justice is in your hands. And when I say your hands, I mean the hands of the people of the United States. George Floyd mattered. He was loved by his family and his friends. His death shocked the conscience of our community, our country, the whole world. He was loved by his family and friends. But that isn't why he mattered. He mattered because he was a human being. And there is no way we can turn away from that reality. The people who stopped and raised their voices on May 25th, 2020, were a bouquet of humanity, a phrase I stole from my friend Jerry Blackwell. A bouquet of humanity, old, young, men and women, black and white, a man from the neighborhood just walking to get a drink, a child going to buy a snack with her cousin, an off-duty firefighter on her way to a community garden, brave young women, teenagers, who press record on their cell phones. Why did they stop? They didn't know George Floyd. They didn't know he had a beautiful family. They didn't know he had been a great athlete. And they didn't know he was a proud father or that he had people in his life who loved him. They stopped and raised their voices, and they even challenged authority because they saw his humanity. They stopped and they raised their voices because they knew that what they were seeing was wrong. They didn't need to be medical professionals or experts in the use of force. They knew it was wrong, and they were right.
So I'll say this, people, look, I watched the video when it first happened, when it first came out, and I felt like there was something wrong about it. I felt enraged. I felt bad for George Floyd. I felt like the police officers, for some way, shape, or form, didn't treat the situation correctly. And, you know, again, it's for the jury and the courts to decide this. But I did, at that time, I felt like something happened. And I said that I don't think that Derek Chauvin should get like a murder charge. But I did say I felt like he should probably at least be charged with a manslaughter charge, some type of negligence, but not necessarily direct murder. Excuse me. And then Barack Obama came out and said, today the jury did the right thing, but true justice requires much more. Michelle and I send our prayers out to the Floyd family, and we stand with all those who are committed to guaranteeing every American the full measure of justice that George and so many others have been denied. And then Eric Holder as well. Now, you know, this is the Fast and Furious bunch, so I'm not giving them a whole lot of credit, but I'm just telling you they came out and said the same thing. Basically, the genre there, this whole theme was the same thing among all of them. You know, there was still no justice. They took him to court, found him guilty, but there's still no justice. So, like I said, maybe they should have tarred and feathered him and then hung him and then took him to the guillotine in public and cut his head off. Maybe that would have been a little more justice for them. But Eric Holder says, with this verdict, we have a moment, an opportunity, but it's not enough. There are still hard questions to be asked, tough truths to be faced. We need a movement now for reform and positive change so that justice becomes commonplace, fair, and humane. And I keep saying this, people, and I did a show yesterday, but in my opinion, what this is going to do is this is going to push the United Nations peacekeeping force. They are going to push this. And they may not call it this, and you're still going to see police officers in your communities, but it is going to be a United Nations ran force under international control sooner or later. I can guarantee it, because that's what the documents show. Publication 7277. Nevertheless, there were some who were furious with the verdict, and this was MSNBC News' Jason Johnson. He said this. This was his response to this.
I'll say this, Nicole. Like I said, I actually always thought that he would be found guilty because it's sort of a cultural makeup call. But I'm not happy. I'm not pleased. I don't have any sense of satisfaction. I don't think this is a system working. I don't think this is a good thing. What this says to me is that in order to get a nominal degree of justice in this country, that a black man has to be murdered on air, viewed by the entire world. There have to be a year's worth of protests and a phalanx of other white police officers to tell one white officer that he was wrong in order to get one scintilla of justice. That doesn't make me feel happy. That doesn't make me feel satisfied. It makes me worry about what's going to happen when these other officers are held on trial. It makes me upset all the more that we didn't have this for Breonna Taylor. It makes me concerned about what's going to happen in the trial for Ahmaud Arbery. So, no, I mean, this is not the system working. This is a makeup call. This is the justice system trying to say that, hey, this is one bad apple, because that's how this is going to be interpreted. It's going to be this one bad apple. He got in trouble. Yay, blah, blah, blah. And yet there's still going to be young black men and women across this country being shot today, tomorrow, and 2 weeks from now, because unless we have some radical reform, there's no lesson learned.
Here's the thing, guys. Again, like I've said, if we want real, as they would call reform, then you have to focus not on black or white crime, but just police brutality, in my opinion, in general, if that's the case. Is that really the case, though? You got this was on CNN, and this was a BLM protester, basically after the guilty plea, and they were being interviewed. And one of those And here is that. I'm sorry, it cuts in and out because I don't have a big crew here at 6 Sempertyrannis News, so I have to do everything myself. So here is one of the interviews, and this is the voice of Omar Jimenez talking about the guilty plea.
And one of those people who was very emotional when the verdict was read. I want you to introduce yourself, but also just tell me why you were so emotional once you learned that the verdict was read.
My feeling was it's very bittersweet because his family, much like a good friend of mine, Sandra Bland, Sandy as I knew her, will never see him again, will never touch him. Will never hug him. His daughter will grow up without a father. They'll never see him again. He's still 6 feet under. So justice, in my opinion, will never be served. But it is very bittersweet. It's at least something. We're getting somewhere in this country. We're seeing some progress.
So that was from Newsbusters.
And one of those people who was very...
So again, you're still seeing this theme that they waited all this time to see this man go to court and then be found guilty. Maxine Waters and the dictator-in-chief Biden, all of them coming out and saying, we want this man to be found guilty. You've got BLM and all them out there ready, and then he's found guilty, and now that's not enough. And more people, excuse me. Maya Harris. Let's be clear. A just verdict is not the same as justice. Okay, well, what the hell is it then? Because they're never going to be satisfied, people. They're going to want to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. We won't have real justice until police stop killing black people. We won't have real justice until black people can feel safe sleeping in their beds, leaving a shop, jogging, walking down the street, and every other thing that is taken for granted by many every day. I mean, I'm thankful every day when I wake up and walk around and go places. When I see police officers, people, I feel a little uneasy sometimes. I feel like if they stop me, I've been stopped a few times by police officers, and each time I get a little nervous. But my nervousness is to think to myself, Mark, put your hands up on the steering wheel, comply with the officer, be, respectful. If you doubt what he says, just go ahead and let him give you the ticket and then go to court. Now, I'm not trying to compare myself to black people or anybody else. I'm just simply saying that if you're black out there and you feel like you're the only one that gets nervous when a police officer pulls you over, I get nervous too. I'm wondering, in my mind, is this police officer, is he an alcoholic? Has he had a bad day at work? Is he got a chip on his shoulder? Does he have a power trip? Is he going to misconstrue something that I do and react in the wrong way and shoot me or do something? I don't know. So I do understand that. But police, there are so many police out there every day doing their job. I think the last estimate I looked at, 800,000 police officers or more in the United States. 800,000. And I'm going to show you a couple things about that. But Chucky Schumer came out, said, "I'm thankful for George Floyd's family that justice was served. America will was forever changed with the video of Derek Chauvin killing George Floyd. However, a guilty verdict doesn't mean the persistent problem of police misconduct is solved. We'll keep working for meaningful change." Listen, I don't feel like Derek Chauvin necessarily killed George Floyd. I feel like Derek Chauvin's negligence in handling the things properly contributed to the death of George Floyd, who already was on drugs and had problems. And creating that situation, the tenseness and so on, may have contributed to that. So that's why I before this verdict said, I don't think that he should probably get a murder charge, but he probably should get some type of manslaughter charge. And that was my opinion. Okay. So, do I feel for George Floyd and his family? Yes, of course I do. He was a human being. He was probably a decent guy who had problems. He some people on one side says that, he was just a scumbag and this and that, and the other side says he was an angel. And my opinion, he was somewhere in between that. He probably wasn't like the worst of worst people, but he had some problems and issues, and he's had some run-ins with the law. That doesn't mean that he should be treated wrongfully and things like that. So that's my opinion on that. I do want to show you something else, though. BLM. Here is from the National File. I thought this was interesting. This is an article from the National File. The Hennepin police, let's see if I can get that up there, showed dozens of buses arriving full of armed rioters before the Chauvin verdict. Okay? 20 to 40 buses plus flights arriving at MSP daily, buses and planes arriving full of passengers with riot gear, arriving with helmets, and arriving with gas masks, okay? All of these people arriving. Law enforcement sources with knowledge of Hennepin County and Minneapolis police investigations revealed to Patriotically Correct radio show host Stu Peters that law enforcement intel briefings indicate armed Antifa and Black Lives Matter militants are being brought into the Minneapolis area on 20 to 40 buses, as well as on flights arriving daily at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. Okay? New intel drops are coming in, Peter stated. And he said additional flight info also says that people are coming in from all over from Minneapolis, St. Paul Airport. They're arriving daily, 20 to 40 buses plus flights. And buses and planes arriving full of passengers with riot gear, arriving with helmets, arriving with gas masks. These are all protesters. These are all rioters and Antifa coming in here to loot, riot, burn, and inflict violence and pain, then run like weak cowards. So, again, look, there's a difference between protesting, too. If you come with protesting with signs, flags, shirts, things of that nature to protest something, that's one thing. If you're coming in riot gear and you're having gas masks and all these things, you're planning to riot, you're planning to inflict some type of violence, and yet on the left, they're not doing anything about that. There's nothing said about it. In Portland, there's attacks on sheriff stations. They're trying to burn the sheriff stations down with police officers, law enforcement agents in these buildings, and there's nothing done about it. People, this is what the problem is. So I want to show you a survey. This is from The Hill. I'm going to read it. What the statistics show about police shootings and public safety. Okay? And this was just published. It says, whatever the verdict in the trial of former Minneapolis policeman Derek Chauvin for the killing of George Floyd, which now we know he was found guilty. The case and the tragedy of another death, this time of 20-year-old Dante Wright, during a traffic stop in nearby Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, should not be used to advance the narrative of systemic police racism and brutality nationwide. No one has done more to save and protect black lives, indeed all lives, than the men and women in police uniforms. I'm just asking you to hear me out on this. It says, among the victims in today's society and racial upheaval are the overwhelming majority of innocent, hardworking people living in minority county communities who are being victimized by nationwide spikes in violent crime. Their communities already are beset by a lack of job opportunities and quality education, neither of which is their fault, nor the fault of the police. Yet, now they are beset by increased crime as well. Police have become victims too, as they are expected to do the impossible while being attacked from all sides and portrayed as excessively violent or trigger happy. Any discussion of policing and crime, including police interactions with minorities, is complicated and often turned into emotional debates by an array of factors, including sources and causes of crime itself. Now listen, let's take a look at some of the statistics on police actions, okay? And I'm going to actually blow this up so you can see it on screen because I thought this was a good article. And anyone who's honest with themselves, all of us at this point, we need to have this discussion, but we need to be honest with ourselves. It says any discussion, so it says in New York City in 2018, 36,000 New York police officers answered more than 6.1 million calls. In all of those calls, a total of 35 police shooting incidents were reported, despite one common refrain that the city's police are trigger happy. And of those 35 incidents, 6 involved police suicides or attempted suicides, and 4 involved animals. So we're talking about 0.01% of shooting incidents, or 99.9% of police calls in which no shots were fired by the police. This is not exactly a shooting gallery. More important than cold numbers are the human elements. In the early 1990s, New York City averaged 2,000 murders a year, and with approximately 75% of the murder victims being African Americans. During the 20 years of Giuliani and Bloomberg mayor administrations, and for some time afterward, police commissioners Bill Bratton, Ray Kelly, and others implemented proactive procedures such as the broken windows policy. During those administrations, murders were reduced by more than 80%, which means that more than 10,000 African Americans were potentially spared from being murdered. Despite claims today that this aggressive policing constituted a reign of terror against African Americans and other minorities, Commissioner Kelly's approval rating among African Americans was more than 2-1, 63% favorable, 27% unfavorable, and 4-1 among Hispanics, 76% favorable and 18% unfavorable as he left office. Yet, following the George Floyd killing last May, violent demonstrations and riots labeled peaceful protests by many in the media broke out in New York and continue through the summer. Buildings and businesses were vandalized or destroyed. Macy's flagship store was looted. St. Patrick's Cathedral was defaced. Molotov cocktails, bricks, and rocks were thrown at police who were trying to restore order. Hundreds of cops were injured, many hospitalized. One senior New York police officer described to me how, after he was hit in the face with a brick, a mob surrounded the ambulance and tried to prevent him from being taken to the hospital. In response to the violence in the streets and the social upheaval, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo criticized the New York PD and said he was proud to stand with the protesters. Mayor de Blasio and the city council defunded the New York Police Department by $1 billion and passed legislation restricting reasonable police actions. And you know, when that happened, that resulted in higher crime rates there. And it says, unfortunately, the results are in 2020. 2020 saw a 97% increase in shootings and a 44% increase in homicides, with the overwhelming number of victims being minorities. Subway crime is up, and not surprisingly, 87% of respondents in a recent Metropolitan Transit Authority survey said they were worried about increasing crime on the subways, and they're avoiding mass transit as a result. Police are retiring in record numbers. People once again are afraid to walk the streets in New York City and many other cities. And so far in 2021, shootings and murders in New York City are continuing to increase dramatically. And it says it's time for political, governmental, community, religious leaders to stand up against invidious, reckless, anti-police attacks and rhetoric, which were undoing decades of progress against crime and are causing death and suffering to innocent people. People, listen. You know, here is another article. And this is from guns.com. This is a survey. Fewer police officers fire their service weapons than Americans think. Many Americans believe that it's, rather common for police officers to fire their service weapons, but in reality, it paints a different picture according to a new report by Pew Research Center. Okay, about 30% of U.S. adults estimate officers fire their guns on duty a few times a year, and more than 80% estimate the average cop has used his weapon at least once in the field, according to a national survey from Pew Research conducted last year. But listen to this. In reality, only slightly more than a quarter, 27% of police officers say they've ever fired their weapons on the job, according to another survey conducted by the National Police Research Reform Platform. The survey was conducted from May to August of last year. A representative sample of nearly 8,000 officers working in more than 50 police and sheriff's departments with 100 or more officers were the subject of the survey. Male officers, white officers, those working in larger cities, and those who are in the military or who are veterans are more likely than female officers, racial and ethnic minorities, those in smaller communities and non-veterans to have ever fired their service weapon while on duty, the report says. Let me repeat that. Male officers, white officers, those working in larger cities, and those who are military veterans are more likely than female officers, racial and ethnic minorities, those in smaller communities, and non-veterans to ever have fired their service weapon while on duty. Breaking down the numbers, 30% of male officers said they have discharged their weapon on duty, aside from training or time at a gun range, compared to 11% of females. Along racial lines, 31% of white officers have fired their gun, compared to 21% of non-whites. And those who have served in the military are more likely to use their firearm in the line of duty. 32% of veterans have done so, compared to 26% of non-veterans. It says the authors of the report point out that just because officers surveyed fired their weapons doesn't mean they necessarily shot someone. And they also note that the factors associated with an officer having fired a weapon on duty doesn't mean those factors cause officers to do so. So this is just some generalities. There are lots of officers on duty their whole life who never discharged their weapon the whole time they've been on duty. I have met some. They say, yeah, I served 30 years and I never fired my weapon one time in the line of duty. So I just thought that was interesting, people. Now, lastly, I'm going to try to keep this video short. House Democrats unanimously have supported Maxine Waters' call for more confrontation to block GOP censure vote because, after what, Maxine Waters said, they were calling to censure her. But the House has just rejected a Republican resolution to censure Maxine Waters for saying that we've got to get more confrontational. So basically, the House is endorsing Maxine Waters' call for insurrection, because that's what it basically was. You had all these people set up and ready, and you had Maxine Waters basically...
The yeas are 216 and the nays are 210. The motion is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the question on ordering the previous question on House Resolution 330, on which the yeas and nays were ordered. The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Calendar Number 14, House Resolution 330.
On this vote, the yeas are 216 and the nays are 210. The motion is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the question on ordering the previous question on House Resolution 330, on which the yeas and nays were ordered. The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Calendar Number 14, House Resolution 330.
On this vote...
So that was them basically... rejecting this. They rejected the GOP resolution to censure Maxine Waters for her remarks, and the Republicans basically were saying that she's inciting violence by her remarks over the protest. Now, think about this, people. Here's what I'm going to say, and just be honest with yourselves. If this was Donald Trump and Donald Trump had said those things while he was president in office, they would have been impeaching him by now. They would have started impeaching him that day. House Minority Whip Steve Scalise commented on the vote saying, right now I haven't heard any Democrats speaking out against what Maxine Waters has said, and it's time for Democrats to speak out when they see it on both sides. They only want to speak out on one side of the aisle, but not the both. And that's hypocrisy, I think, and it's starting to shine through. So, excuse me. Lawmakers voted along the party lines 216 to 210 with no defections on either side. And it was Kevin McCarthy who he's the one who introduced the bill. So, impeachment for thee, but not for me, is what Maxine Waters is basically saying. I'm going to show you a cartoon from, I don't know where this was at, I think, but this is good. This is on Zero Hedge. But here is basically the hypocrisy. Liberal Logic 101. Peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. He's inciting a riot. Get more confrontational. Pioneering a movement. You know, that's the problem that we're having now, folks. And we're going to see more rioting. We're going to see BLM and them being emboldened. And now the problem we're going to see for blacks and whites, and I'm telling you, unfortunately, for blacks and in these neighborhoods, you're going to see possibly a lot of police officers seeing that their hands are becoming more and more tied, and in fear of, if it's a white police officer stopping a black man or a Hispanic person, they may become more apprehensive and not want to even be involved in that confrontation. And that particular person, whether they're black or white, could be criminal. They could be doing nefarious acts. They could be out there. So this is only going to embolden more crime. And then you've got, Biden and this administration, this rogue dictatorial administration pushing now gun control, severe gun control measures, ultimately gun confiscation, assault weapons, and so on. You've got the open borders issue. Now, finally, Biden and them are coming out and admitting basically there's a border issue, but what's going to happen with it, it remains to be seen. This is the totalitarian push for the Great Reset, people. This is what they're doing. There was another article that I'm not even going to go over, but they are pushing this Great Reset. And there was an interesting article lastly on that. Let's see if I can find it real quick. And I think it was the head of the United Nations, actually, who is basically, let's see if I can find that article. I had it set up and then I set it aside, and I apologize. If I can find that, I will do a video on that. So, listen, people. I'm not necessarily trying to take a side tonight on this. I'm just trying to get people to understand that this justice stuff that BLM and Antifa are pushing is not justice. They're being funded by the Soros Open Society Foundation. They're being funded by the Democrats. The Democrats don't want real justice. They want control. That's what it's about. So pray for our country, people. We've got serious issues with Russia developing, with China developing. We've got internal issues galore with this rogue administration. And there was a video today that I saw with President Trump being interviewed. I believe it might have been on Fox News. I can't remember. Where he is saying that he's seriously considering running in 2024. We'll see. So with that, I'm going to sign off, people. Please subscribe, share this video, subscribe to this channel on Rumble. Let's get this video out to people. I love you. I appreciate you. And, I'm doing the best I can. I hope that you can enjoy the videos, and I hope that the presentation and everything makes it appealing to you. But please share this video with others. For Six Emperor Tyrannus News, I'm Mark Matheny saying protect your own rights, because if you don't, no one else will. Thanks for watching. Whoops. I meant this one.
It's just a mask, you guys. Don't be a jerk. It's for the greater good. It's just a vaccine, you guys. Don't be a jerk. It's for the greater good.
Go get a damn mask and put it on your face.
Mask on, fuck it, mask on, mask on.